OFN population.
Right. Good evening. Welcome to the study session of January 23rd. Donna, will you do a roll call, please?
I will. Councilmember Blush.
Here.
Councilmember Sherman. Here. Councilmember Gutierrez.
Here.
Mayor Nesco.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Schmidt.
Here.
I don't see Councilmember Stearns. Councilmember Gilmore.
Here. Thank you, Donna.
You're welcome.
All right, tonight, Community Economic Development Director Jay Hill has an update for us about our comprehensive plan, the beginning.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, council members. So I briefed the council when we first kicked off the plan last fall. But since a couple of new faces here, I'm going to do kind of a initial brief and then just kind of where we are as well. So some of this might be a little bit repetitive from what I said before, but essentially, we're about 3 months since the kickoff. We have a draft demographics report, which was provided in the packet materials for today. We also have a draft engagement schedule, and now that we have our steering committee members selected, we're going to be setting up our first meeting with the steering committee and having them provide a little bit more input to the engagement schedule, making sure we're reaching out to as many people as we can. Our outreach, and I'll go into it a little bit later, it's not just about just telling people what we're doing, but actually proactive engagement. This is the plan for the future of the community. We want to make sure that we're getting people's input. We're being able to distill that all into a plan that reflects what the community wants, not just a few people who show up.
Thank you. We'll show the record that Councilman Stearns is here.
Yes, I am. Thank you.
That's good. Go ahead.
So we've been going through data collection and identifying our steering committee. That was our work for the end of 2023. Now with 2024, we're kicking off public scoping and kind of taking all of the data that we've collected from the demographics reports and other things, and then projecting that forward. What do we need for the future? How much we want to be planning for? Part of that, we're going to use traditional baseline growth rates because there still is infill development. There's houses getting taken down and two going up in place and something. But we do have a lot of vacant land within city limits and within the UGA that could be annexed into city limits. So we need to factor all of that in as well. So that feeds into scenario modeling. We kind of look at different growth models and whatnot, and then we come up with our plan, our recommended action, and a couple of alternatives. We do the draft environmental impact statement. And then we take that through to an implementation strategy, not just, hey, here's a plan. These are some cool things we want to see in our community. How do we get there? How do we fund it? How do we plan for this? So we make sure that it actually happens. I don't like plans that just sit on shelves. It's a waste of everybody's time and energy and excitement. This is an opportunity for us to identify how we're moving forward with the things that the community is agreeing. So and then by the end of quarter 2, 2025, so June 30th, 2025, it must be adopted by the state and have gone through the motions with Commerce. So our team, of course, it's there's staff, and it touches everybody from myself, Public Works Director, Finance. I mean, the entire city has a role to play in it because we not only want to talk to people who are kind of overseeing their various departments, but the people on the ground have really good ideas too. They're the ones out there, putting in the pipes and plowing the roads and whatever. And so they see this stuff and they can provide a lot of insight that's really valuable. So we'll have a lot of opportunities for internal scoping. Come back to the council a couple of times, steering committee. There's these other opportunities to make sure that we're getting as much as we can from the community. And then as a reminder, we selected SCJ Alliance as our consultant to do the plan. They're also doing Mason County's comp plan. And we have a joint planning meeting scheduled with Mason County to kind of work through our joint issues through the UGA and some shifts to the UGA boundary and planning for infrastructure out in that unincorporated area. What's our annexation priorities, things like that. So that'll all be moving along with the process as well. The steering committee, we had a number of people from the community reach out. We selected 6 residents of the city, and Councilmember Gutierrez volunteered to be liaison, and the mayor tonight also requested to be on the committee. So we're full up now, and I'll be sending out meeting invites for the second Tuesday of every month. Hopefully we'll be able to have a quick, steering committee meeting hour before the council meetings, and they were kind of getting it done in one night, and a couple of the same people are. So the outreach, again, we've got the draft public engagement plan, and that's going to be refined here in the next couple of weeks. But we have a variety of ways that we're going to be trying to reach out to people. We'll be putting ads in the paper when it's time. We'll be trying to set up pop-up events at everything from the schools to some of our community hallmark events and things like that. I've already started what we call the road show, where I'm going out to various organizations and kind of giving people the heads up. I already spoke to the realtors November, I think it was, and I going to Kiwanis, Rotary, and a couple of other groups over the next couple of weeks. So I've got one tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. So I'm just taking it out and taking the message that right now, this is what we're kicking it off. We're in what's called the scoping phase, where we're really trying to define what is the scope of our project, what are the things that we want to evaluate. And basically, there's no bad ideas right now. We throw everything into the hopper and see what shakes out. We had one of our staff here came up to us after the first staff touch on this and said, man, we should have an ice rink. We need an ice rink for youth sports here. There's nothing, you have to go all the way to Tacoma or Bremerton. And I just in passing mentioned that to our state delegation, and they were very excited about that because two of them play hockey. And so, there's some possibilities that, no matter what the idea is, let's put it in, let's see what happens. Let's see how it shakes out. So let's see if there's a place for it, if we can fund it, if it's something that we can make happen. And, we'll eventually rank, prioritize, and get stuff into the plan. It's not a guarantee, but we want to hear everybody's ideas because you never know what's going to pop up that could just really be very transformative for the community. So our engagement objectives, we want to not just inform residents, but we want to give everybody, participants, more ownership in the outcome of the planning process. And we want people to, at the end of the day, to be able to say, yeah, I heard about this, I was there, they listened to me. We want to be inclusive of a range of perspectives. And that's, there's people on all ends of the political spectrum, people that want to see growth, people that don't want to see growth. And we just need to figure out how do we balance that in a way that speaks to the community. And we want to build support. And so that's, something that I'll continue to ask of the council is that, you guys help be cheerleaders for us. That's what the steering committee is for. That's what staff is for. We're all trying to become as educated as possible to share that information with the public. And then the last engagement objective, and this one we'll kick off very soon, is consulting with local tribes. We want to be respectful of not only, the political and social kind of expectation, but also the legal requirements that are now given to us by the state. So I'll touch real quick on demographics. Now, these numbers are going to seem a little weird. I just talked to the mayor this morning about this, actually, that it may not reflect current rents, house values, things like that. This data was collected primarily by either state or federal sources 2 years ago now. It's 2022 data, which means it was collected in 21. So we're 3-ish years behind when it was actually picked up, and not, and there was a census in the middle of that too. So if it says, this is the median income, this is the cost of the home, this is what it was, at the time that the data was collected. And unfortunately, we don't, there's no data product out there that we can get to really indicate, what the true value of, incomes and rents and things like that are. There's anecdotal data, and we can definitely share that in the planning. But the data that we're given by the state and by the feds is just, unfortunately, it has pretty low resolution. But what we do know, and what's been consistent going back through a couple of versions of the comp plan, is Shelton residents are typically younger, have lower income, and more likely to be renters than Mason County and Washington at large. And it is a less expensive community to own a home in Washington state versus even the unincorporated county. And so those are things that we see that we need to plan for. When we have a community that's younger and more likely to rent, we need places for them to rent. We need support for families. We need more daycare. That's a huge thing that we've been hearing from people already, is that there's just not enough places for children. I have a small child. I live in Olympia, but I have the same crisis there too. It's just really poor access to daycare. So, and I know the state is working on some fixes, but we'll see when that's come. to our account. Growth rates, as I mentioned just a little bit earlier, we had originally anticipated that our town was going to grow pretty substantially. We had a couple of development projects in the pipeline. We had some growth rates that were pegged based on historical numbers, and then it kind of plateaued. Between 2017 and 2023, our actual resident count, based on building permits, based on the OFM population data, only increased by a couple hundred residents, while Mason County grew by a much larger amount at that time. We want to make sure that we're planning effectively, that we're not basing things on population that's never going to be here. And we also want to make sure that we're doing such a job that if we exceed those numbers, we've also baked that in as well. So that's where the development scenario planning comes into effect. And if anybody has any questions while I'm going, please just jump in, because I'll just keep going. Another demographic challenge. So I mentioned there's the high volume of renters versus occupied, and we simply just don't have kind of the larger apartment complex mix. We already identified before scoping this that we need a multifamily zone. Right now, if you want to build an apartment, you have to do it in a residential zone, essentially, or one of our downtown zones, and that's it's problematic from a permitting perspective. That's why we're just not seeing them. So we're going to take a look at that through the comp plan and see if there's a way to encourage some multifamily growth, both ownership and rental, that would help beginning home buyers get in as well. Another issue that we see is the inflow versus outflow of employment in Shelton. So basically, more people commute into Shelton, and it may not seem like it when you're driving, but more people commute into Shelton on a daily basis than commute out. And so what that means, it sounds great, people are coming here to work, but they're also taking that money at home. They're not living here, they're not spending it here, they're spending it where they live. And so this was surprising to me, because I heard, anecdotally, people commute to Bremerton, people commute to Olympia. It's true, but more people actually commute into Shelton.
Numbers look like how many more, and you have.
So there's 4,291 come in, 3,380 go out, and 796 actually live and work in town.
So that includes people who are commuting in from Mason County. So even if somebody's just down
Correct.
Arcadia Point, they're commuting into Shelton.
That it does count, yes. So they could be said. That is true. And then just one other interesting point is that 19%, nearly 19% of adult Shelton residents have an education less than high school or GED. And so, when we're talking about attracting jobs here, we've been chasing data centers, we've been chasing high-tech manufacturing, we've been chasing things that we need to build a workforce. We don't have the workforce to support. Exactly. So we need to, with what we can do with our efforts, and it's a concerted effort. It requires the school district, it requires the college, it requires probably other entities that we haven't even contemplated working with yet. But it's going to require building a workforce to attract the kind of jobs that we're looking to attract here, and to help us build our economy and quality of life.
Yeah, so to go back to the people coming into town to work, we know that to be fact, because we did that workforce housing summit a few years ago, and there was several hundred people who from Sierra Pacific, jailers, prison guards, that actually lived in Olympia or further, that actually came in here for those jobs because there was nowhere for them to live. There's no rentals, there's no homes for sale. But we do know that that's
But our police department, places.
so, yeah. So we need homes.
Agreed. We're working on that in the short term. We have a couple of developments in the hopper right now that'll add up to a couple of thousand new units. But that's, everything takes time, everything's market dependent. The rise in interest rates has really slowed down the appetite. Two of our developers have told us that they're just kind of putting their plans on hold until they have a better grasp of what the market's doing, because things have, in their opinion, slowed down to a point where it affects their profitability. So with regards to land use scoping, some of these things we had talked about before, so we're looking at probably reducing the UGA in the northeast, kind of around the Island Lake area. Highly unlikely that that area will ever annex. It's built out, it's large, single family lakefront homes, et cetera. But expanding the UGA in the southeast and northwest, where there's a lot of land that is large lot, you know, if you were to combine 2 or 3 lots south of Arcadia, for example, you could build a very large subdivision just by combining a couple of lots. And so we're going to, again, these are topics for scoping. This doesn't mean this is what the plan says. This is what things that we're going to look into that have been suggestions from various planning documents from people we've reached out to, so on and so on. The regional retail zone, as I mentioned previously, I'll stop saying as I mentioned previously. I mentioned a bunch of these things previously. The general commercial zone that we have is kind of our one size fits all, and that's everything from small Napa Auto Parts and a small store, not in our downtown, but you know, along our corridors, to the Walmart. And it's very different forms of development, and it's not context appropriate. So what we're going to do is try to split our general commercial to be much more of the corridor commercial, neighborhood commercial, like smaller scale development. And then, you know, up on Wallace and Eland, that will be the regional retail zone. That's where your big box stores, your chain restaurants, drive-throughs, those kinds of things are more appropriately located. Multifamily zone, I mentioned that just a minute ago. The multi-use trail, that's actually moving very quickly, and that's my second topic tonight, and we'll talk about that. The Goldsboro Water Trail, this was something that's been identified in a couple of documents, and that's basically having a paddling trail going along the creek. There's some physical and ecological barriers to doing that, but we own a bunch of access points. The city owns a lot of access points to Goldsboro Creek, and so we should look into that. There's you know, if you've ever been out to Falls City during the summertime on the Snoqualmie River, you can walk across the inner tubes. There's so many people out in that river trying to cool off, and so you know, if we had an opportunity like that, it could provide a lot of interest during the summertime. Access to Oakland Bay. As a landowner in this town has told me, we're a waterfront community without access to the waterfront. And we need to work on that in a lot of creative and unique ways, and we need to increase our residential density downtown. The more we can focus our growth downtown, it costs us less for infrastructure, which makes it pay for itself a little bit better. Newly identified topics and requests. So the Shelton Creative District, this was identified in the 2015 downtown plan. And the idea is in that plan, it was called an arts district, but the state now has a program called Certified Creative Districts. And essentially, we get put on the map as a place for art, and there's varying terms of what art can be. There's one is like digital and manufacturing arts. One is I think Woodinville's is, you know, mostly around wine and beer and distilling and stuff like that. So there's an opportunity for Shelton to create a creative district. And we've already identified a couple of, we've begun the application process. We've got some support from Blue Zones. If any of you have been involved in the Blue Zone summits and things like that, they identified this as one of their priorities for action. And so they're giving us support from their consultant to do some landscape architecture work to help us with the application. And we're going to apply for it, get some money, and try to do some improvements basically between Railroad and Grove, and between about 5th and Front. And so that kind of block of the community, you know, kind of the downtown creative district, to really try to make a home for the arts. And so we'll be setting up a steering committee for that. The application requires it. We'll be coming back to the council for letters of support, things like that. But that's underway right now, and that kind of all happened by accident, a chance meeting at the Economic Development Summit, actually. So that was a good thing that I went to that. Olympic Heights, the owners, well, the representatives of the owner of the property up there, it was Peacock Ridge previously, and they're calling it Olympic Heights. So not the 200 unit subdivision that's currently in application for development in the very short term, but the longer term, the 2,000 plus units up the following the hillside back towards the port property. They have requested a series of land use changes to the bulk of their site will continue to be neighborhood residential single family product. But they have also asked for a future multifamily zone to build some apartments, townhomes, and a school site. So there'll be some public and institutional zoning there, and then there will be general commercial. They want to put some businesses and some mini storage, kind of as you get closer and closer to the port, you'll see so they've requested that, and it'll kind of go into the scoping as well, as we look at our land use planning. An Oakland Bay sub-area plan. So that, there's been a lot of interest from people wanting more access to the waterfront, people who are concerned about what happens if the mill closes, what happens to the property, what happens if, you know, there's just a change in interest or ownership or whatever. And so at the very least, you know, we can't design a site, we can't predict what's going to be there, but we can put into the plan a sub area that basically calls for future study and an identification of, you know, if this community experiences a change, whether voluntary or involuntary, what does that look like? What are we expecting? What's the hope? What's the long-term vision for what could happen there if we need to see different land uses on the site? The ice rink that was mentioned in passing, and then after the interest by two of our state reps and senators decided to toss that in there. We again, no bad ideas. We'll see what happens.
Bowling alley.
It's kind of funny. I was
About that too, yeah.
I was looking at some sites for sale today online and I saw that all Dell's is for lease. So I thought, wow, that'd be a great skating rink. I was thinking skating rink, not ice rink, but that's what to look at.
And then the last topic is annexation priorities. And this has come out of a couple of discussions with folks. Just like, where is the city going to grow? We have UGA already. We have a lot of interest in the very northwest corner of the community of the UGA, but it's not physically, but legally connected to the city at this time. We can't run stringers and islands and things like that with our annexations. And so we're going to have to look at how do we annex to grow to capture that area where the industrial development that we need pretty bad. We need a lot of development, but where the industrial development is going to be locating. So, and then if there's any additional scoping comments, I'm happy to, you know, take them either now or later. Or if you ever have ideas, if you're just, oh, I think this would be really great, please email them to me. And you know, everything goes into the hopper right now.
I mean, I'd like to investigate if it's possible for like our railroad and Coda be retail and restaurants and no more offices or storage buildings and, you know, just some of the, we got some buildings that are boarded up down there that really don't do anything for us. But I don't know if that's possible to have a district where it's just retail and restaurants on Main Street.
We can definitely look at the allowed uses down in that area and just make sure that, you know, everything's compatible. I'll agree, like mini storage is not, some of the uses kind of on that corridor are less, you know, pedestrian intensive.
Yeah.
Some of those offices, I will contend, I mean, I'm not saying it's a bad idea, but some of the offices that are down there draw foot traffic, and then people go on to go, you know, after they go down and talk to somebody, they move on to get lunch, they move on to get their hair done. There's some generation. We can look into what our appropriate mix of uses and which ones maybe are not. My goal is to get away from our, I don't know if you all have ever looked at our prescriptive land uses table, but it's, you know, 60, 70 uses long. It gets down to like the spinning of thread and yarns or something to that effect. And it's like, we don't need to be that specific. Let's have retail, let's have pedestrian serving office, let's have medical, let's get to some very broad categories and let people do what they want with their property. You know, if you're meeting general criteria and you're not kind of casting any externalities on your property, but, you know, adjacent property owners, you know, we should be more permissive. That's my opinion. So, but we will definitely have a review of uses in the downtown. So I think that's a good idea. Any other, while I'm here.
So I think, Jay, I think something that is maybe a little bit important to bring up here is the significance of the comprehensive plan. And the things that point back to it and the decisions that we can make as a result of what we put in our plan. Can you talk a little bit about some of the challenges that come up or have come up since you maybe have been here in your role, where you pointed back and said, oh, comp plan doesn't articulate that well enough, or it's incompatible with our comp plan? It's something that has either no answer or sorry, can't support it.
There's internal and external consistency. So I'll talk about internal consistency first. So our land use code comes out of the comp plan. So we define, this area is generally this, and then the zoning code implements that comprehensive plan. If the comp plan doesn't kind of foresee what should be, how do I say this? Let's say we have identified this area as industrial and somebody wants to come in and do something that doesn't quite meet an industrial category. It's more of a residential or some kind of use. It's prohibited by the comprehensive plan, even if it's a great idea. And then, well, now we're left with, we have to go all the way back to amending the comp plan. We can't just amend our zoning code to try to capture some of these things and whatnot. So we have to be very like loosely strict, I would say. We want to allow the most possible kinds of things with the least possible externalities. And we want to have that foresight where we're not locking ourselves in to something that, we could miss out on great opportunities. So internal consistency, we have to make sure that we're not trying to do something in our zoning code that doesn't meet with the comprehensive plan, because that's unlawful. Our zoning code can only implement the comp plan. It can't go far afield and say, oh, well, we'll catch up with the comp plan later. They have to talk to each other. External consistency, when we're having, other organizations or people or whatever, coming in and trying to do these things. I was kind of mentioning this stuff. If they have an idea, if they own some property and they want to see something happen, and if there's a very clear policy that this can't happen on the site, the height limit is only this, if we get too in the weeds on some of the comp planning items, it makes it difficult to accomplish. And then to follow along with that, if we want to get funding for various projects, if we want to get letters of support, if we want to, basically to show that the community is behind this effort, the comp plan is the place to do that. And if we go to DOT and say, hey, we need money for a roundabout here or something like that, sorry to pick DOT, but and they say, well, there hasn't been a corridor study, there hasn't been, it's not in your comp plan, it's not in your, but it makes it really hard for us to apply for those kinds of things. And so as we're talking to various state agencies, we need to, how our comprehensive plan and our zoning code need to be in compliance with all of the regulations, in order for it to be lawfully effective. And when it's lawfully effective, we can use that as basically a vehicle for the application for grant funding, for establishing tax increment financing or utility local improvement districts or things like that to implement the comp plan. If it's not in there, it doesn't happen. So this is our once every 10 years chance to get this right and say this is where we're going for the next 20. And we'll have a chance. I mean, if we don't do it right the first time, there is another periodic update, it'll come, or we can always amend it. And it's not that I want to spend a bunch of time amending something we just approved, but if we find that, we need to tweak it to make it right, it's a living, breathing document. This isn't, once we build it, it's anchored. Anyway, is that all?
Yeah, I think my point there is it's a heck of a lot more than just what do you want things to look like, feel like. There's a lot of opportunity ahead for the city and for the community. Our plans need to reflect where we want to go, otherwise we're not going to get funding for it. Yeah, I guess this is the thing, ultimately it'll be the city council that makes the decision on approving this plan. So in 3 years, when people are complaining about the UGA boundary lines, it'll be our decision of where those lines get drawn ultimately, right?
This is also how we plan on where we're gonna spend our money on water, sewer.
Right.
Stormwater, infrastructure,
Paths,
yeah.
anything that we physically need to construct or maintain, absolutely.
So it was mentioned before, I think it was Councilmember Schmidt said that we should start thinking really big if we want to, get access to large federal grants like the Recompete Act. So this is that opportunity, right? Like we can say, I want everyone to have high-speed internet in every city of Shelton. You get high-speed internet. I mean, that's the way to attract people and think about, hey, we move to Shelton, we get high-speed internet. I mean, we should think big like that, or we want turnarounds so that it will increase our flow of traffic instead of traffic signals. I think.
I'm sorry, I'm not cutting you off, but I think maybe what you're getting at is we're gonna establish as well, like this is what level of service we want to see in the
Exactly.
city for traffic,
Correct.
for access to broadband.
Should we think about going up to C level or B level, not D level? Should we, is that how? That's how I'd like to see our comprehensive city plan. I'm lucky that I'm on. Thank you for selecting me council and city. But I'd like to talk about those things and go big and think big. And if we miss, then hey, we were in that attempt and we gave it our best shot.
And there is the utilities element, so like things like broadband access goes right into that. We can feed from the community broadband action plan that was done earlier this year and funnel that right in, and we'll be reaching out to the utilities and things, so that's an excellent point. Like, these are the kinds of things, like the infrastructure. A lot of people, I mean, at least in my experience, think economic development, it's like, you know, giving tax breaks to people to come build their companies or something. We can't do that in Washington. Like, if you're in like the South, you can cut huge tax breaks with people in the town. We can't do that here. It's unlawful. So what do we have? We have to build the best infrastructure possible, and that's everything from fiber internet to streets with sidewalks, right? And so we'll, you know, the best thing we can do for our
And
community.
build our water system
is help
large
scale.
enough to have a large capacity for the future.
Exactly.
Not think small and just surviving.
And where we're at right now, telling developers, we'll wait 18 months until we can get the new, you know, pump station online before you can have water, and people will walk away from that. And we need to have the capacity ready to go for people, to build, to develop, to invest in this community.
And this also affects schools and PUD and other, you know, agencies, not just us in the county. I mean, it's, you know, the schools have to plan for this too.
Yes.
So if we think we're gonna have 3,000 more kids in 20 years, they need to find room for 3,000 more kids.
Move on to the next one. So this is just kind of a very quick and not to scale map of kind of, you know, some annexation topics. So as I previously mentioned, we're looking at the area kind of north of Spring Road and kind of around Island Lake as we're moving it from the UGA. It's largely built out. We're probably not going to see growth in that area. The residents of that area aren't particularly excited about the idea of annexation. But we still need to maintain our UGA at a size to meet our projected growth for the future. So we need to look at areas, where do we expand the UGA? And kind of right now, it's kind of the area, you know, towards the southeast, kind of between Dickinson and Arcadia, kind of along the corridor along Highway 3 out to 101, kind of, you know, where we've got good highway access. And then there's maybe some areas that we, you know, need to look at annexing more quickly to bring our services out. So we've had the green areas are people who have reached out to us with recent interest for either annexation or at the very least extension of utilities, which our extension of utilities requires annexation, or at least a waiver of no protest annexation. We also have a bunch of waivers on file from previous projects that have received our utilities. And so we could annex those properties at any time because we have those extension agreements. And so, you know, those are other logical areas for the city to start bringing in and receive the tax base.
I have a question for those red areas with those, how would that change for them if we went ahead and annexed them?
So it would depend on the manner of annexation and a couple of other things, but generally speaking, not a lot changes. Like their on paper service provider is different. Their on paper taxation authority is a little bit different, but I mean, right, they can vote in town. And it's also, I mean, like, you know, does Mason County actually respond to the little island that's you know, up off of what is that, like Adams up in that area? Do they actually respond, or is it city police that are already responding to these unincorporated areas, you know, tall timbers, you know, is it the city or is it the county? Who's actually responding? So a lot of it's not actually going to change. It's still the same fire district. It's still in previous annexations I've done in other cities where there were already established neighborhoods and they were coming in for utility purposes. There was a fear that, you know, we're going from the county to the city and our taxes are going to go way up. We actually found that because we have to do a flyer to show the bonded indebtedness. We have to show like what the impact is to your taxes for doing it. And most of the annexations that we did while I was in Redmond showed that their taxes went down by coming in from King County. So, once people see that, they're like, really? That doesn't
Questions
sound right.
about it all the time. What happens to me if you annex us? So I just thought I'd ask it out loud.
That's the case, do these red areas just represent areas that we're basically surveying, but we're not collecting taxes on?
We are already serving water and sewer utilities there, but again, we're like practically serving some of them, but with our other services, but not.
So like those two islands, like the one over by Callahan and the one up North Cliff, right? Every one of those residences is accessible off of the city street. If there's a fire in any one of those houses, they're gonna be pulling off the city fire hydrant. None of them are paying taxes into the city. They're not paying for the road utility, they're not paying for any of that.
Do we maintain those roads?
Yes.
Uh,
Not in
not in the-
up into their neighborhood, right?
Okay.
So we're not collecting any.
Yeah, there's a few weird pockets in town.
Well, and I'm sure their kids go to school in town. If they have kids.
North Cliff has houses on the right that are county and houses on the left that are city, and
Up until recently, well, at least technically still, those little pockets are paying their fire protection taxes to Fire District 11, which is Island Lake, not Central Basin, which is gonna, like you were saying, is actually underflowing. But now they're contracted with services and annex, it's their real story. But up until last year, that house is on fire, technically it was an Island Lake Fire's call, and then the city would have been.
So how is it advantageous to us if at the city? If we go ahead and annex those red ones?
So it really depends on what the state of like roads and the services that we're already providing there are. So like if the roads are newer, like in a lot of cases, these waivers are within the last 20 years. So streets are in decent shape, whatnot. There's not a huge cost for us to annex. We have to provide our contracted fire service and our police and our planning services are, whatever kind of responses. So there's a nominal cost to that. We get the property taxes, which are not huge for single family residential. So the benefit of this is we have a cleaner boundary. It's more clear, instead of, well, they're paying their taxes to the county, but through mutual aid, it's our response to their property. And like it cleans that all up.
Yeah,
there's-
those little red spots would be really confusing if you were an officer and you're like, it's a county or a city that needs to respond to that. I could see how that could be really complicated.
there's a couple of streets just a block away from A&W that are on sewer.
Septic, you mean septic?
I'm at septic, sorry. I mean septic and not sewer.
Like Jones Road headed out Arcadia Road, Jones and that other one where there's several septics up that when there's.
Dickinson or,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but the ones that run down also.
right, and isn't that's up here, isn't it? Up above Arcadia? That kite one on the bottom, where is that exactly? I'm looking at this.
That's we're right, Fairmont.
Is that by like Chevron up there?
Yeah.
The little red
The one that
diamond.
said Kate on,
Oh,
right
okay.
on the bottom.
Yeah, there's a couple of properties. It's right behind the gas station.
Okay, yeah.
Same, yeah, same.
Right.
area.
Same area.
Yeah,
They've, there's a sewer line actually that runs from the gas station, like force main that runs through that area. so.
right.
So again, like and a lot of people, I mean, on a daily basis, whether it's the animal shelter or the planning department or whatever, I get calls and then people, oh, I'm in the city of Shelton. When you actually show them on a map, no, you're really not, you're in the county, you go talk to the county.
Yeah.
Oh, people in Timberlake think they live in the city of Shelton.
People in RC, I mean, I get it all the time, but it gets very, very confusing in the UGA system. So. So these are things that we're gonna be looking into is, what's our annexation priority? What do we want to bring in sooner than later? And what do we maybe don't need to annex now? What do we need to further study? If we need to move our UGA boundary to incorporate the numbers. So it's just,
What it says study required, what kind of study is required? What do we study?
but what's the potential for
Okay.
highest and best use of the property? Most specifically, what you're seeing here, there's two large gravel extraction operations. How long are they gonna keep operating? How, is there a benefit to annexing them sooner than later due to revenue? Revenue that we could capture instead of the county or something like that.
For later.
And again, absolutely, what is the highest and best use later for that property? And, you know, do we have it appropriately zoned for what it might be?
So when we remove areas from the UGA, do we add the same amount of areas, the same square footage or square miles?
It depends on our future population projections, but generally speaking, UGAs don't shrink. So we'll either have to keep it the same or increase it. So the next step, like I said, I've got the roadshow coming up where I'm just presenting at any organization that wants to hear about this or, you know, do more in-person scoping. We'll have the steering committee kickoff where we finalize our participation plan, and we've already started work on the land use analysis and policy frameworks. We basically have to kind of audit our current code and plan and see, you know, what has changed. I mean, there's pages of just titles of legislation that have come out in the last 8 years. We have to make sure everything, you know, is compliant with that, because if we don't catch it now, Commerce will catch it later and it'll delay adoption and implementation of our plan. So we've got to go back through and make sure that everything's been captured. The first week of February, our consultant staff is going to be out here for kind of touring the community, looking at some of these issues and places, and we have a meeting set up with Mason County to do our joint planning for the UGA and get that kicked off anyway. And so, yeah, we're full speed ahead on this right now, on all of our other projects and all of our other day-to-days, but this is the fun stuff. So, and that's all I have for that presentation. So again, if there's ever anything, you're up at, you know, 2:30 in the morning, getting a glass of water and you're like, why don't we have this? Or, you know what, I'm really bummed that we don't have, or that we need this, or have we thought about what we want this to be, you know? Please.
When people are knocking on your door, going, "What?" I'll ask you.
Send them to me. I'm happy to have those conversations. So
I think I can roadshow, that's the big thing, is what is the importance of this? Why is this actually important? What's it? Just letting people know when somebody just hear the microphone complaining about something we're doing. It's back to a plan that was created 10 years ago. They were all involved.
And that's another, thank you for reminding me, it's a key thing to mention. So our EIS, we're doing what's called a planned action EIS, where we're going to say, you know, we have planned for this many units, this many vehicle trips, this much water usage, this much whatever. It doesn't count everything that could possibly ever happen, but we analyze and we basically put some brackets around what are the environmental impacts of these. And that gets baked into our EIS. And then later on, when a developer comes in, or you know, a new company or a new, you know, anything, they can claim coverage under the planned action. So they can say, oh, well, you already analyzed 15,000 new homes. We're taking 3,000 of that. So now there's 12,000 remaining before there's significant environmental factor. I'm simplifying, but that's generally the process. And so
That in and of itself, though, is actually an incentive.
it shortens down the time that a developer needs to spend going through that analysis at the time of their development. We can say, no, this has been asked and answered, and it's, you know, the town has already decided that we wanted this in this area, so
Basically, you did their homework.
we do it.
Boundaries, so it's just like, you know, we're looking at residential ones here, we're also like. Recreational uses, like if we wanted to add a pool or a splash pad, would that be something we'd also want to include in that kind of consideration?
So it would just be like gallons, ERUs or gallons per day, you know, something to that effect. You know, we'll kind of bake that up a little bit later as we get closer to that, but what we can analyze within the budget that we have and whatnot. And so, you know, if we said we have the capacity for 1 million extra gallons, we've got the water rights for it, we've got the whatever, we've already analyzed, blah, blah, blah. Then somebody could come in and say, oh, I'm building a Great Wolf Lodge and I'm going to use your whole 1 million gallons. And maybe that's not exactly how we want it to happen, but you know, that's something that they could presumably do. So Great Wolf Lodge did not pay me for that.
And how, one more time, how were the utilities engaged in this? Because the other utility providers in the area are incredibly important in this as well. So all of our best laid plans can be worthless if the utility doesn't come alongside us, and same thing with the county.
Yes, so once we get through our initial projections and our kind of initial land use that comes out of those projections, right? So we need to plan for a minimum of 6,000 new homes within the next 20 years, right? So we're gonna do that, and then where are those gonna go? We allocate them based on available land and development patterns, things like that. And then that's the time to engage the utilities and say, all right, can you support this? What does this take? Should we move some things around in order to fit it? If we just go to them right now and be like, what's your plan for 20 years? You know, they might have something, but a lot of times their plans are built on our plans. And so like we need to lead off to say, this is what we're thinking. Can you do this work? And then, you know, so it's iterative. We might have to come back and be like, we're not gonna go serve that. That's too low density. We're not, you know, it doesn't make money for us or whatever. So we'll have those conversations.
Well, that would make sense, because if you're planning a development in one area, you need to know that the services need to be in that area, right?
Today, that's wildly disconnected, so.
We'll work on that. We can, unfortunately, you know, it's our comprehensive plan, and we can make policies and we can draw lines on a map and suggest that things happen. At the end of the day, hopefully it's, you know, the utilities will come, make that happen for us. So good to move on to my next much shorter, but also very interesting topic, so. There we go. So Crosstown Trail, so it's been identified in a couple of previous planning documents, and you know, around the time that the mill, Simpson no longer owned and operated the mill, they deeded the Simpson Timber Railroad to the city of Shelton for the purposes of presumably building a crosstown trail. And they left some money in the Parks District for it, and for I think 8 years now, 9 years now, we've had this rail line running through town, not doing anything. We haven't done anything, you know, haven't come up with a plan for it. We haven't really decided what does the community want this to be, other than someday it'll be a rail trail. And just through a series of, again, really random kind of these meetups with people and discussions with folks at Peninsula Regional Transit and DOT and a couple of other entities. We actually found some planning and design money. Get into that here in a little bit, but we can start moving on this at least and get ready for when we do have construction money available. So the concept is a 2.5 mile crosstown multimodal paved path. So if you've ever been on the Burt Gilman Trail in Seattle, or the you know, Sammamish River Trail in Redmond or something like that, you know, we're a wide paved separated trail, non-motorized uses, get people out walking, biking, whatnot. So the phase one is basically going to go from the western boundary of the city, well, actually from almost one, because we own the right of way out there, to Neyland Park. And it's about 1.5 miles. And then phase two, this is where the recent state money comes in, actually, through the Connecting Communities program, is from Neyland Park to Sheldon Marina. And it's about almost 1 mile, and it parallels Highway 3. And so kind of the concept that we're working with, and of course, you know, it'll change as we go through the planning design process, but, you know, kind of a 12-foot wide standard paved trail separated from traffic with lights, benches, garbage cans, public art, interpretive signage, all that kind of stuff, and protected crossings of our major streets, Railroad, 7th, SR3, so on and so on. So we currently own, we in the city, own the purple alignment here. And then once it gets to Neyland Park, it just kind of dies. There's not really a defined route moving forward. So this yellow dashed line is just a very preliminary concept. It could be a block over in any direction. It could be a little different. It might cross at the bridge there at Old Grove Creek. We might need a new bridge. It might move a little bit further. We're not exactly sure how it's going to get from Neyland Park to the marina, but that is what the state just gave us $200,000. Well, is in the process of giving us $200,000 to determine. And so they're giving us money for planning and design. And then we're going to couple that with the money that we already have in the Parks District for the other phase, and do a robust crosstown trail plan. The benefits of this is it's going to connect our most heavily used park 2 schools, high density residential areas, bunch of affordable housing. Eventually, extension, it'll connect to park and rides. It'll be a safe route to school for hundreds of students. A great tourism potential along a historic railroad, along a scenic corridor, across the creek. It's actually going to be a really great opportunity, and it builds a spine for an improved pedestrian. No, if like going back to like, kind of the Burt Gilman, when I used to live up in Seattle, I mean, go out riding and there's other side trails that connect to it, and there's, spurs that go into neighborhoods, and then there's bike shops and breweries and all kinds of things that are oriented like right along the trail. And it's an impetus for growth in these communities when you get this kind of a trail project. So I have, maybe not as high hopes as, Ballard or Fremont, but the Shelton version of it, I think we could see some very promising trail oriented development. So the funding stack, as I mentioned, we own the right of way, we have some money for planning already. There's potential rail salvage revenue. So when Woodinville just got rid of about 1.5 miles of their rail line, they got $130,000 for the steel that was on the ground. So we'll probably keep a little bit of it for historic value, maybe some public art gets made out of it or something, but generally speaking, let somebody salvage that and that'll go back into the parks fund for construction. We have a legislative request at the state currently for the $2.0 million balance of that. See if that happens this session. It's a short session, as everybody keeps reminding us, so probably won't, but we'll try it again next year if we need to. Phase 2 is the Front Street alignment. So we've got ample right of way along Front Street between the edge of pavement and the mill property. And so we're looking at what we can do to put the trail kind of just off of the street in that kind of green area right now. And then again, we've got the 200,000 from the Connected Communities program that's coming towards us. But the construction is completely unfunded on that. So we'll have to, look for future phases and what we can do. When we look at how this ties into some other community planning, I mentioned the Creative District earlier. The Creative District bumps right up to this. So now we're talking about like downtown to an art exhibit, like we're really starting to try to like build some synergy between some projects that we have here. So. So there's some challenges. So we're and opportunities. Goldsboro Creek, the rail bridge that's there currently, it needs to be refitted for pedestrian vehicular traffic, because we need to send maintenance vehicles across it and things like that. So, but also there's a lot of restrictions on bridges and shading and salmon bearing stream and so on. So we'll have to do it in a way that's respectful to the environment, but also gets people across safely. Also along the Simpson corridor, the right of way widens out to almost 100 feet in some areas. And there's a lot of places where it's 60 or more. There's the potential to maybe carve some of that off, either to sell to adjacent landowners, or some of it already adjoins properties owned by like Habitat for Humanity and some other low-income housing providers. And so maybe they could better utilize the properties that they already own for affordable housing. So there's a concept there, but we'll look through that in the planning process. And then phase 2 with Front Street, just as again, there's no space on the existing bridges, so we'll have to get real creative there. And crossing Goldsboro Creek will be tough. And there's truck traffic. There's just a lot of traffic coming down Highway 3. There's a lot of traffic going into the mill. So we'll try to find the best way forward with that, but these are things that we'll have to tackle to get the project done.
Probably a discussion for another time is getting these semis off a railroad. They're coming up Highway North,
That's something that's
south.
pretty appropriate for the comp plan. We're doing the beefed up transportation plan as part of this, and the contract for that will be coming to you guys shortly. The idea is that we want to do a larger look at our both motorized and non-motorized pedestrian network. There's definitely an opportunity to identify a preferred truck route. It gets tough because there's just not a lot of other ways out to 101. And so if somebody's coming in from, say, Belfair, they can't use railroad. Do they go up North Cliff, or are we diverting it that way?
And I'll be back to the bigger discussion. Our freight mobility challenges in the city of Shelton being locked between Highway 3 and 1. So we have much bigger problems than just shipping trucks from one direction to the other. But main streets and stuff, they still have to accommodate on 101 and 3, which are.
And it's interesting you mentioned that. That's actually why we got the $200,000 in planning funds. This Connected Communities program looks at communities that are bisected by state highways and how do you better integrate different halves of the community after they've been cut by a very busy road. So it'll help us with this part, but it's still a long-term challenge to solve. And we'll look into that with the transportation plan this year.
Considered vacating was a time between Builders First Source and the other business across the street. That turn is terrible. It's just the concrete's destroyed and all that, and it's traffic backs up into the roundabout. You just vacated that, you can sell it to Builders First Source or something.
Between Subway and Bullard Field.
They run forklifts between the two buildings and stuff. It's not totally safe for traffic, and it just causes traffic to back up. But you just send everybody up. Again, your transportation. It's good idea.
We'll look into that too. So next steps on the trail project is, we'll get the state planning grant funds award. We'll do the planning and design. We'll put out an RFP for that and get somebody to help us with all of that, refine our cost estimates. So we know exactly how much it'll cost. Right now, we're using kind of average costs from the region, about $1.4 million per mile for a paved bike path. Ours might be less because it's a really good high quality, basically rail corridor. But there might be some environmental concerns that cause the cost to go up. We just don't know. And then also we'll have the rail salvage RFP coming out this spring, and the goal is to have construction begin pretty much right after it dries up. So April, May, get somebody out there to pull that off. And following the rail removal, we hope to do some kind of an interim trail. We don't have to go through any environmental review or anything to just put more gravel on top of the gravel that's already there. It's not considered an impervious surface for a stormwater person. So, if we can at least get an interim trail in there, get people out walking, get people out, and maybe mountain biking, not road biking, but, get something out there, show the value of the community. And then when we're applying for our grants, we're improving an amenity instead of constructing a whole cloth. So, and we'll continue to apply for money and shake the tree and see what falls out and try to get this thing built. These rail trail projects are just really transformative for a lot of communities that have them. So hopefully we'll see some fruit on this here too. So that is my presentations for the evening. Thank you guys for your time. And as I mentioned, on any of these topics or anything else, feel free to drop me a line or drop in chat. Also, if there, your constituents, anybody in a community group or anybody just wants to talk about it, please give them my contact information. This is my life for the next year and a half, so I'll make sure it gets done right. I want people to know what we're doing. It's not a secret. It's not voodoo magic. It's it's a process, and everybody gets their little stone in the soup. So,
Right. Council have any new items for discussion? I just want to mention a post that was on social media this week. I'll stop. I know how I feel about those. But it's a huge shout out to thank Officer Pickens. He's such an incredible police officer. My son wanted to play basketball with him for Christmas. Weather and life had prevented it. Officer Pickens stopped by our place and asked my son if they could wait till the weather was better to play, and bought him a football. The kindness and influence has shown that my son means so much. Thank you. And I actually confirmed this Officer Pickens today, and he said, yeah, that's what happened. But I think, thank you, Officer Pickens, for
Yeah, that was a really good post, and there was a lot of people from the community that also reached out about that and said a lot of wonderful things about Officer Pickens. I've seen him in action downtown. He's usually pretty glad to be, man. I reached out to him too. He was like, yeah, man, we try to do the best we can for the community.
They're some great officers and they care about their.
So just want to mention that I read that.
Thank Love that.
All right, anybody else have any discussion? All right, meeting is adjourned at 6:59 PM.
I was like.
I forgot about our meeting tomorrow. I never put up my phone. That's tomorrow, right?
Tomorrow.
Like, you don't
It's
remember.
7. You said 7 o'clock.
Oh, yeah.
I go, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, I never put that in my phone.
Perfect. That's the one in. Insert.
That is, with Rotary, and I needed to get a list from Danielle for that.
Shelton Woodbury or?
Yeah,